Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning. I'm sorry we're running a little bit late. I am a sort of last minute substitute for your facilitator this morning. And I'm also letting people in and approving registrations and trying to do some other things. So again, thank you. I'm looking for Teresa Ryan and I don't see her, but I hope she will be in here soon. Because I'm going to say, if you have a problem, contact Teresa. So that could be challenging if Teresa's not here. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. We only have an hour this morning. So I want to welcome you. My name, for those who don't know me, is Diane Barber, and I am the Executive Director of the Pennsylvania Child Care Association. And we welcome you to this webinar. Karen and I, and I'll introduce Karen too, but Karen and I have been talking about this for a while, and we thought that it was important that we share what's going on with the community, because I think it's some exciting work, and Karen's going to talk a little bit about some things that have just happened recently that I think contributes to the work that she's doing and the work that she hopes to be doing with the community, with the childcare community, connecting them to the business community. So I have just a couple of slides I want to share. They're just housekeeping. So first one here is please do sign in to the chat just so that we know that you're here. Use the chat box, and you can see, depending on your type of system, it's usually at the bottom on the little chat. And you can also use the chat box to ask any questions. We will also be able to release you, so your mic, so that you can ask the question live. We do ask, because background noises can be annoying or distracting, that you do keep your mic on mute. And let me see who else I got. I'm sorry, I'm doing, there's Teresa. Okay, there's Teresa. All right. And there's a whole bunch of people coming in now. Okay, all right. So chat, things like that. We're also, we also have enacted transcript. So if you missed something that was said, you can scroll up and see what was recorded. That's great. Let's see, what do we got here? Attendees, as I mentioned, are in mute mode. Speakers and sound, if you're having problems hearing through your computer, it could be that it is a bandwidth problem. And so we would suggest that you call in, and the call-in number was in your invitation. Again, if you have any questions, or if you want to ask question live, please raise your hand and we'll look for those little icons to do that. Perfect. And if you do have technical support, if you do need technical support, you can call Teresa at 717-657-9000, extension 101, or you can email her. All right. Yeah, so we have 88 people, or actually 90 people registered for today's session, which is a lot. And yeah, okay. So this is all I need to cover for right now. And I am going to turn this over to Karen. Let me start her slide presentation.
Thank you, Diane.
You're so
Hi,
welcome.
everyone. It's kind of exciting to be back with you guys. It's been a while since I've been on a call with providers, and I'm seeing a lot of familiar names and faces. So I'm kind of psyched to be on this with you all. And I'm excited to tell you about what I've been doing since, getting into this role. So for those of you that don't know me, I'm Karen Grimm-Thomas. I am currently the Early Childhood Education Strategy Advisor at the Pennsylvania Key, and I am leading the Creative Childcare Solutions initiative that is funded through OCDEL ARPA dollars. So some of you might know me from my previous role. I spent about 5 years as OCDEL's Director of External Relations. So pandemic wise, we spent a lot of time on Zooms with everybody. So, and I transitioned into this role pretty much at the beginning of the last fiscal year. So like late June, early July. And so what I want to do today is to really, I want to first take a little bit of time at the beginning to give you guys some background on the Creative Childcare Solutions Initiative. I want to make sure everybody understands, you know, the reasoning behind it, why we're doing this, what its goals are, what we're not doing, because I've heard that there are some concerns in the community about what we're doing. So I want to really make sure everybody understands what the work actually is. I'm going to share some lessons learned so far, because this is a brand new thing and it's evolving all the time, both in terms of my interactions with the business community and then what's happening in the larger kind of early childhood world, both in the state and at the federal level. Because like Diane said, there have been some recent developments that are really, really interesting. As I've gone through this role in the last 6 months, there's been this real, and I'm really excited about this, a real conscious shift to go beyond just engaging the business community and really think about how to engage childcare programs as partners in this work. And so that's also part of what I want to talk to you all about. Is I have some ideas, but I want to hear what your thoughts are. I want to hear, because you guys are the ones doing the work and you're the experts, and I want to get your input. Okay, so let's see, Diane, if you can go to the next slide for me. Okay, so Creative Childcare Solutions. So just to give you a bit of background about all of this, how this kind of came about. So even prior to the pandemic, in the Wolf administration, they put together what they called the Keystone Workforce Command Center. And they were really charged with doing a lot of work to figure out what were the barriers to economic growth in the state, across all industries. How could we make Pennsylvania an attractive place for businesses, an attractive place for people, and a place that really, folks could come and work and raise a family. Early on in this initiative, they identified a lack of access to childcare as a barrier to economic growth in the state. That was known. And so OCDEL was pulled into those conversations. At that point, it was the then Deputy Secretary, Tracy Campanini. She was pulled in. They developed a childcare subcommittee and really started to have conversations about childcare, mostly centering around childcare deserts. There was a little bit of conversation about price and access and those kinds of things, but it was really mostly about childcare deserts and places that, that they didn't have adequate access or didn't have adequate slots. And then the pandemic hit, and you all, I don't have to tell you what happened because you all lived it and you're living it still. But we really went from this idea where we had pockets that were deserts to this kind of more widespread capacity issue across the state because of the staffing crisis and all of the stressors that the pandemic were putting on programs. So at the same time, we were having these conversations within OCDEL about deserts and hearing from everybody that, more and more folks were having trouble accessing childcare. We had the Early Learning Investment Commission that was kind of shifting their focus as well. So ELIC started out under the Rendell administration as a governor appointed commission of statewide business leaders that were really about creating public will, creating legislative will for investments in early learning programs. And they did an amazing job. I think, Pennsylvania is really held up as an example that the work that ELIC did in partnership with all of the work that the campaigns did in terms of ELPA, the Start Strong, or the Pre-K for PA campaign, and now Start Strong, that, it's a bipartisan issue in Pennsylvania. Everybody gets that investing in early learning is an important thing. And so what they've started to do based on this data from the Keystone Workforce Command Center was really shift and start to think about how do they engage the business community around how, solving the issue of a lack of childcare for their employees. And so they put together an amazing website called Investments in Caring PA that kind of brought together a lot of different things for businesses. They also did some work, they did some studies with the US Chamber and the Pennsylvania Chamber that really showed that businesses were very aware that this was a problem for their employees. and they understood the economic impact it was having on them, but they really didn't, and they wanted to do something about it, but they really didn't know what to do about it. They didn't really know where to start. They didn't know what resources were available. They understand their business model, but they didn't understand childcare. So then we were also starting to get lots of inquiries from businesses basically saying, hey, I have space. I want to start my own childcare. And so that's when OCDEL kind of went, wait a minute here, because, everything, the Office of Child Care is really, OCDEL has a responsibility not just to administer subsidy dollars in Pennsylvania, but also to think about access and to think about equal access, particularly for low-income kiddos that are accessing subsidy, equal access to high-quality care. And so knowing, and this is something I say to businesses all the time, that childcare really is an ecosystem. And what you do in one part of the system can have ripple effects in other places. Recognizing that businesses might be really great, like have all these good intentions and think about opening up something that will meet the needs of their employees, but are they meeting the needs of all of their employees? And are they doing things that then make it harder for families, other families in their community to access care? Are they pulling resources away from programs? And so it was very much like, we need to do something about this. We need to offer some technical assistance. We need to really kind of put some things in place that will increase the likelihood that if a business is going to look at these issues, that they're going to do it in a much more responsible way, a much more equitable way. And I'm going to warn everybody right now, my neighbor is getting water delivered and my dog just figured that out. So if she starts to bark, I really apologize. I'm alone in the house and can't do much about it. So that's kind of like the bigger picture of why we were doing this. So when I go in and talk with businesses about this, our first inclination is not to say, oh, great, you have space. Yeah, let's open up your own place. That's actually rarely the case, because when we look at, in a lot of places, there is care. The issue is that there's capacity care issues right now. And so adding brand new slots onto that is going to, what I try to explain to them is, you're just going to exacerbate the problem. You're going to have trouble staffing that facility, and you're not going to be operating at full capacity. And the other sites that are around you are going to be operating at even less capacity than they are now. So it's really about investing when you can in this current system. Like what's available right now to your employees? What are those barriers that they're experiencing and accessing what's there? And if there is a real need to open up and add slots on, it's the idea that all because you run a successful business does not mean that you understand childcare. This is a totally different model. And I'm fairly certain you've got an expert in your community. So if we do think that this is a good idea, you need to reach out to that childcare person, that current provider, and talk to them about partnering to run that program. So it's really about, our above and beyond goal is to invest in the current early learning community whenever possible. So I'm just going to pause and see if there's any reactions, or Diane, if you have any reaction to that, or if anybody has specific questions about the intent behind this initiative before I launch into like actually how it works. What are the nuts and bolts?
Just a couple of thoughts. I mean, one was Karen and I talked, back when she first started the job, because back in the days, and those who have known me for a very long time know when we were doing school age, when I was doing school age in southeastern Pennsylvania, one of the jobs that we were doing was growing school age, and what that meant. And so what were some of the challenges and what were some of the opportunities? And I think that I see this in a really positive, looking at this in a very positive way, because Karen, from the very beginning, said this is not about businesses, as she said, moving outside of their model and operating childcare. Because as one of PACA's members said to me not too long ago, when a corporate partner decided to operate their own program, they're like, this is really hard and it's really expensive. And where do you find the staff? And it's like, Ding dong. Yeah. So I think that this is, you go just like you wouldn't have, somebody who makes, I don't even know, applesauce, pave your roads. So you go to the experts. Okay. I'm using very oblique, whatever analogies. But I think that this, when you hear about on-site childcare, I think the first thing, well, what about the community-based programs that are already struggling or who are already serving those families, and what does it mean? So I don't know. I'm looking here to see. I see Clark has funding should always follow the child and the family, so the choice is not taken away. So again, that is choice. So it is. So if we pull, we actually eliminate some choice from some other from the community if the childcare program can no longer sustain itself. So I think that this is about sustainability and addressing the needs of working families, right?
Right.
So this is good. I don't see any other, let me look here real quick. I don't see any hands up. So again, if you want to make a comment or ask a question, please raise your hand and we will scroll through and look for them. I think that right now we're good, Karen.
Okay, great.
Go to
Okay, so
next slide.
you can
Oh.
see from the slide that's up there, then we've got these basic initiative goals. And so we're talking about, first and foremost, building the capacity of the business community to think about childcare as a potential benefit to their employees. So helping them understand the economic impact to them individually, to their individual business, that a lack of access to stable quality care has on their employees. So I talk to businesses about absenteeism. I talk to businesses about presenteeism. I mean, and you all know this. This is the one I say when they say, "What's presenteeism?" I'm like, okay, so I'm a single mom, and probably right about like 11:30 or 12 o'clock, I start to get a little bit distracted because I know that the dose of Tylenol that I gave my 2-year-old this morning before I dropped them off at care is about to wear off, and that their fever is probably going to go above that 100-point, marker. And I'm going to be getting a call that says I need to come get my kiddo. And so I'm not totally there at work. I'm worried about that. I talked to them about the idea that we know that we've got data, we've got national data, and we've got Pennsylvania data that actually quantifies the number of folks that either pass up additional work or cut back on their work or actually drop out of the workforce. And it's usually moms because they don't have an access to adequate care. So what is that costing your business in terms of advertising for that open position, bringing somebody in and training them, getting them on board? All of those things are costing these businesses individually. And so for them to be competitive, for them to attract staff and retain staff, they need to really start to think about this. The idea that they as a business can support their employees in some way, meeting their needs in terms of childcare. And so that's the first thing, is to help them really make those connections and understand that. It's also then to help them understand what the cost of quality care is. We all know in Pennsylvania and in a lot of states, in all but a couple of states and the District of Columbia, we think of childcare from a market rates perspective. We use a market rate survey, and all that's telling us is what, families in a particular area feel like they can bear in terms of cost. It doesn't have anything to do with what it actually costs you to provide the care. So making sure that businesses understand that, because if we're asking them to invest in a system, they need to know, why is this so expensive? Because all they're hearing from their employees is, I can't afford it. And then they hear from me, well, there's a lack of capacity. The slots are there, it's just that there's not staff. They can't use the slots because we don't have staff, because staff aren't being paid what they need to be paid, and they don't understand, how does that work? So it's really helping businesses understand what the childcare model is. That yes, if you're going to offer up space in a building, that's amazing, and I don't think anybody on this call would turn their nose up at that. But that's also not the driving force in your budget. That's not your expenses. That's only a drop in your bucket, and you're still going to have those expenses related to staff and benefits and compensation and training and all of those things. So helping them really understand that and understand the differences in terms of quality care, and why that gets ratcheted up even more when you're talking about staff that have a certain level of skill and credential behind them. It's really trying to help businesses understand that when they invest, it's expanding in ways that are going to really invest in local providers. So again, it's not always going to be I'm opening my own center. It's some of the solutions that we talk about is partnering to ensure that there are adequate, that capacity that's existing in a program that's not being used. What can we do to get that staffed so that we can use it? Or are there things that they can provide to employees that they can then take and use in the community setting that best meets their family's needs? It's also helping them think about their family-friendly policies. So, if you can partner with a childcare provider to say, this is the shift that my families are working. And if I can guarantee you that families, again, it's the field of dreams thing. If you build it, they will come. For you all, you need to know that folks are going to be using those slots. And so if you can get that critical mass of families that need the care, that can really kind of support the programming, is there a way to shift the time frame a little bit? Is there a way to shift it to meet their needs? And what can they do to add into that to make that possible for you? What can they contribute to the pot so that that's something that you can realistically do and afford to do? And it's ensuring, again, that there's equitable access to quality care. So we've seen models where providers, where businesses will offer care, but it's priced out of the range of like a third of their employees or half of their employees. So they're only meeting the need of a chunk of their employees, or maybe they are realizing that they need to support all of their employees at all of their pay levels to access that care. But because they're doing that, it's taking resources away from other providers in the community and making it harder for the other businesses in their community, for those employees to access care, and for our kiddos that are on CCW to access and have the slots that they need. So it's really trying to be that responsible kind of like, how do we expand this in a way that's, recognizing that ultimately businesses want to like fix the problem for their employees. It's their bottom line, but helping them recognize that if they're not careful about how they do that, it could have ripple effects that really kind of impact the health of the community that their business sits in, which will ultimately impact them. It might be a short-term solution, but it's going to create a long-term problem that really starts to drain on them also. So those are those main goals. So Diane, if you go to the next slide. So how we do this, again, we're really trying to be purposeful about this. So we spend time with businesses at the very beginning to really understand what their goals are. Like it's important for me to understand, is this a business that gets like that I need to invest? That if I'm going to make this happen, I can't just say, let's open this up and charge the market rate that's what's already in this area and think it's going to work. That I'm really actually, what I'm probably going to do then is actually create an even worse situation, because employees, not only are they not going to have access to care, but they're not going to have access to care that's actually in their workplace. And every day I'm going to come into work and see that childcare center that's only operating at half capacity and know that I'd love to have my kid there, but I can't because they don't have room for them. Like, you don't want to be doing things like that. So let's really, and it's trying to get businesses to have that kind of aha moment that, oh, so I'm going to need to pony something up if I really want this to happen and I want this to work for my employees. So I spend a fair amount of time getting to know businesses, understanding what their goals are, and really trying to help them understand the childcare model and what's broken about the system, why the problem is, why they're having their problems. Diane, if you can go to the next slide, please. So then typically what we do, so this is all collaborative, and really I will meet a business where they are. This is kind of the process that I recommend and I like to go through, because it's data driven. And I think it really, if any of you know me, I love data. I really want to make sure that the solutions that I'm suggesting for a business make sense and aren't just kind of like assumptions based on like what they think is going on. So the first thing that we do is work with the business to do a survey for their employees. So again, a lot of businesses have ideas about what their problem, like what the barriers are that their employees are experiencing around childcare. But, and I say, I respect that. And you have that information is great, but we really want to ask some specific questions and really make sure that we're understanding what the real problem is. And so we do that survey. And then at the same time, I do a landscape analysis for them. So I'm using data that OCDEL has. I'm pulling information about what are the available slots in the area, what is going on. And so that they have this full picture. Here's what employees want. Here's what employees are saying their barriers are. And here's what's actually available in your area, from infant toddler care to preschool to pre-K programs to school-based, district-based programs, all of those things. This is what the full picture is. And when you lay those two things together, that's where their gap is. That's what their unique gap is. And so we really start from that point. Okay.
Interrupt you, but I do want to make a point, because I know that we do have some family childcare providers on the call, but family childcare is a part of the solution.
Yes.
So don't think that we're just talking center-based care.
Yeah, no, that landscape analysis includes that. That includes, I mean, we're looking at what are the family childcare providers in the area and what's their capacity. You guys come up all the time, particularly in terms of, when I'm talking to businesses about non-traditional care, when I'm talking to businesses about infants and toddlers, that using family childcare as a strategy for those gaps makes a lot of sense. And so definitely when I do that landscape analysis, it's the full range of care that's available in an area. Okay, thank you, Diane. Yeah, we want to make sure people get that. So if you can go to the next one then. Okay, so we get this, this data, we compare what the employee needs and what their current offerings are. We talk about what that says to us. And then we talk about different strategies. And so again, it's a range of things, and it's never just one strategy. It's going to be multiple strategies. It's going to be, you need to look at your policies, and you need to think about this, and you need to think, and so it's how do you kind of create this kind of layered, comprehensive strategy for this particular business based on what their employees are experiencing and what's available in the area and their goals. What are they willing to put into this? What are they trying to get out of it? So all those things come together for this puzzle. Okay, Diane, if you can go to the next one. Okay, so at that point, we make some recommendations for them, and then we can also, I can be there to help, support some follow-up kinds of services. So we can come into their program, into their business, and do employee education programs. I've talked to a couple of businesses where just connecting them with their ELRC to make sure that their HR people know what's available and can have some literature to give new hires. Like, this is how you go about finding childcare in Pennsylvania. Like, that's low-hanging fruit. That's really easy. And here's how to connect. Here are the programs that are in your area. We talk about education in terms of the importance of licensed care, the importance of quality care, what to look for. We can help them think about their policies. Do they want to start to institute, a dependent care savings account for folks where they can add in and they maybe contribute to it, that can support families in purchasing care in the setting that makes most sense to them. I do talk to folks about that, though, that's a really great thing. And you always wanted to do stuff like that. But at the same time, that's not going to solve the problem right now, because what that doesn't do is get money directly into a provider's hands that they can use to increase wages. And so really, if you want to really move the needle on this, you need to partner with existing programs, and you need to think about strategies, whether it's reserving slots, whether it's using EITC and doing those scholarships, those tax incentives. It's anything, that ultimately the goal is to invest in your program or in, that's in the area, so that you can increase your salaries and you can then operate at full capacity, or even think about expanding if that's really what the data is telling us needs to happen. One of the things that I'll do also is request for supports around a request for proposal. So if a company really has said, yes, I want to do this and I want to partner with somebody. So how do we go about doing that? So I'll help them put together a request for proposal that goes out, probably ideally through the ELRC. And I would work with PACA, I'd work with PENACE to make sure that that's really widely distributed and everybody knows about it. And you can take a look at what that company is wanting to do. And then if you're interested, bid on the opportunity to go in and partner with them. We haven't done it yet. I'm getting ready to do it up in the Northeast in Erie, but doing some pre-proposal webinars for programs. So if you think you might want to, put in a bid for this, let's get on this webinar and let's have a conversation. Because again, the important part of this is that when you put in your proposal, that you're putting in a proposal that helps this business understand this is what it costs to provide this kind of care, not this is what the market rate would be. This is what, we really want businesses to understand why, again, the last thing we want to do is set up a situation where we're just perpetuating the problem because we're continuing to just operate at market rates, and we're not doing anything that can increase that compensation for staff and make sure that you can keep people and continue to operate at full capacity. So that's actually a part of the project that wasn't initially in the works, but as we got into this work, I was like, we need to do this. If we're going to get businesses to say, I want to reach out and partner with providers, we need to support providers. We need to support you guys to be able to have those conversations and to say to a business, this is what it's going to cost, so that they're not just going towards, picking out the lowest bid. And know that while that's happening, you're going to have me in their ear saying, you don't want to just go with the lowest bid. Like, the lowest bid is not going to get you. Remember the conversations we had about what quality care looks like, what those elements are, and how much they cost. And if you go for the lowest bid, you're not going to get that. So, if we're basically telling them, if we're giving them the same message at the same time from two different sources, I'm hoping that that's going to be a good thing for folks. So yeah, Diane, if you can go to the next slide. Okay, so this is where we're, again, why are we doing this right now? I kind of put the cart before the horse and talked a lot about this. But we know this is happening. I mean, it's happening all over the country. There are lots of conversations about this, lots of different blogs where people are talking about the idea that businesses need to start to pony up and think about this. We have a lot of data. I mean, we know that Ready Nation just did an updated report, and the data that they had from before the pandemic that was in the 57 billion kind of range in terms of impacts on the economy has now jumped to $122 billion a year that this is impacting our economy, not having access to care. And that includes not being, again, from the business perspective, it also includes from an individual worker's perspective, and it's usually women. It's women not being able to be fully engaged in the workforce because they don't have childcare. So, and again, just recently, just in the last week, the story is broken that the almost $40 billion that the current administration at the federal level has put out for semiconductor companies to build new semiconductor plants and expand current plants so that we can start to manufacture our own chips and not be as reliant on other countries to supply those chips to us. A contingency of being able to accept those dollars, those federal incentives, those tax incentives, is that companies are thinking about the childcare needs of the folks that are building the plants and the folks that are going to be working in the plants. So this is happening everywhere. So I feel like Pennsylvania was a bit ahead of the curve in our thinking around this, and it's it's exciting. And again, it's not the answer to the problem. We're not saying that this is, I actually had a bit of an existential crisis at one point, probably, and Diane knows this. It was a couple of months into the job where I started to think, oh my gosh, like, we have a history in this country where we tied healthcare to employment. Mm-hmm. And we all know that that worked just beautifully for us. And so now we're going to tie access to childcare to employment. But that's not it. It's not the this is not the last solution. This is not what's going to solve the problem. It's what's going to maybe keep us from bleeding out right now. It's not a Band-Aid, it's a tourniquet, because we are bleeding out. But that doesn't mean that we don't continue to advocate. I'd like to think that by pulling businesses into this on a firsthand basis and giving them real world experience with these problems, it makes them even better able to advocate for those investments and say, this market is broken and it needs to be fixed. And it can't just be fixed from us, by saying that, because again, then we're just creating inequities across the system like we created in our healthcare system. And that's the last thing I want to be involved with. Again, I was like, come off the ledge, Karen, come off the ledge. So I think at this point, I'm going to pause again and see what kinds of comments we're getting. Because I do want to hear what people think about it. Again, I want to get input on whether we're missing pieces of the puzzle. Are we making assumptions about the process that are going to come back to cause problems for us? And I want to just talk a little bit about how I see you guys as a partner in all this, and opportunities for, if you've got somebody, if you have a business in your community that you think either would be open to these conversations, or maybe hasn't even thought about it, but they should be, because heck, half the kids that in your care are their employees, or kids of their employees. So how do we involve them? How do we engage them? I'd love to know about that, because up until now, I've really been using connections through ELIC to make these connections to businesses. And we're in this age of you try to call somebody, and if your number comes up on their caller ID and they don't recognize it, they're not picking up the phone. Cold calling people is hard these days. And even email, sending people emails. I've become a LinkedIn stalker. I'm reaching out to people on LinkedIn, and sometimes that works and sometimes that doesn't. I find the best places are when I've had some kind of a soft handoff, a soft introduction to somebody. Because again, we're in this age of spam calls and spam emails, and nobody wants to open it up and think that somebody's trying to sell them something. So I see you guys as a partner, and I want to have a little bit of a conversation about that too.
So a couple of things. One, if you're interested to hear to know, and I'm sorry, that's my dog and somebody's walking past my front lawn. Oh yeah. I think they're the two big Pyrenees that he particularly doesn't care for. We just posted last night an article on that federal program, CHIP, and it's on our Facebook page. So if you want to read more about it, it was in all of the business journals yesterday, but we did post something up there just to see how they phrased it, which I think is very good. We do have a couple of comments. Karen, Linda suggested to strongly urge you to partner with workforce development boards to facilitate the discussions with employers through their local industry partnerships.
Yeah, there are places where we've done that. There are places where we've had connections with the local chamber. I've also had some conversations. So it's like, it just depends on the area and the state. So I've had conversations with local chambers where they've brought businesses in. We actually have a really nice kind of dog and pony show that Andrea Heberlein, Stephanie Oliveri from Sheets, she's the co-chair of ELIC, and I do, like, we tag team. Stephanie starts out, and because I'm not sure if everybody knows that Sheets years ago did a on-site childcare for their corporate office. They're now exploring what that means for the rest of their large employee base, but they have that in place for their corporate offices. So she comes in and talks about the process that they went through, the thinking that they went through. Andrea comes in and talks about the business case and the data that we have and the investments in Caring PA website. And then they throw it to me to talk about technical assistance that's available to them. And we've had some really good successes with that. I've also had some successes, some places talking to county commissioners. So counties that are recognizing that this is an issue and want to do something in terms of supporting the businesses in their county. But again, there are just huge places in the state. I don't know if we're hitting are we hitting the places where that makes the most, like this is the biggest need? And from my perspective, you're on the ground, you know what's going on. And so if you have ideas for how to connect to businesses in places that haven't kind of bubbled to the surface using those strategies, that's what I'm also hoping to get from you.
So we have a couple, so the chat is now coming up. There was, Clark suggested that this might be for larger businesses, and how could we engage smaller businesses?
So that is one of the things that we talk about. I have talked to a couple of smaller businesses and talking about supporting. One of the things that I can do is support them in thinking about who else in your area, what other smaller businesses in your area are having similar issues. And is there a way to do almost like a shared source model, a shared services model? How do you kind of work together to get the scale that you need for this to have some kind of an impact? Not had a ton of success on that at this point, but have had some really interesting conversations with some smaller businesses about doing that.
Mhm. Allison asked if she could share their story.
Sure.
Hi,
There you go.
Karen. Sorry, hi. I think I'm under Alton. Karen Diana, it's Sabine.
Okay.
From
Oh,
Building
hi,
Blocks.
Sabine.
Oh,
How
hi.
are you?
Yeah, hi,
Hi.
Sabine.
No, I wanted the model that you're talking, we preliminary have developed something really on what you're talking about. And I think it's a realistic thing that can work. We use the format of connecting with our chamber. We're very active with our chamber, where we've been at the conversations with businesses that are struggling with staffing, especially the industrial industries that, they have the split shifts, they have all the different type of hours. So it over the last year, it evolved into, we're working with a company called I2M, they're major manufacturers in our area, where they help subsidize the childcare costs for their employees. They wanted us to do it at their location first, because like you said, they just want it right there on their site. And we said, well, this is pilot. Let's first see how this looks in real life, so while we're going through this, we can kind of mold and shape and develop. So we've had this partnership since the beginning of the school year, where we, in our program, allot so many slots to accept from their program, and they get exclusive spots. So that way there's a good relationship. As their new employees come in, we're part of the HR conversation. We bill them, and they end up monthly, depending on how you set up that system with them, you can set that all up. And then they work it out with their employees of the cost benefit. Our team here did what you were talking about, come up with the cost structure. Now, what that's done on a grander scale of what you're talking about, that business and the CEO of that company is very prominent in our community, is now supporting the issues that we have in early childcare, from the pay rates and from the support systems. So it's been a great synergistic partnership. And I do recommend, and I think you were talking about smaller locations, it could work for smaller locations too. I think if we partner up as childcare providers, 2-3 childcare providers, and go and work with just one company, they don't all have to go to one location. They can pick due to, I might only have 5 slots, and that location might only have 2 slots, and the other one might have 20. But then the employer has a good area throughout the county that they can send their employees to and provide that. And I do agree. I was at the NACCE forum this weekend, and the whole legislative kind of connection. I do agree businesses is a great way to go, because if they don't have employees that are consistent, that's a huge loss for them. So it's a great benefit to give to their employees, whether it's monetary or providing just resources. So just wanted to share that what you're talking about can work for any size childcare provider, but we found it very effective. It took us a while, because when you go to the chambers, they're like, oh, you're the daycare down the street, to wait. We're pivotal at the table because, we can help so many aspects of our community. And then it took one, company to buy into that, understand it. It was courting. It was a relationship. They came into our locations. We went to their whole company and looked at their culture, does it meet the right, is it the right fit? So you kind of have to do that as well, because you might work with a company that you're like, oh God, no, that's not our model. Or they might come to us and not. So that's important too. But just wanted to share that it is something that I think if we all collectively look at that and represent that could be a great supporting block of our foundation that can have a good voice.
I just want to thank you for taking yourself off mute and talking, because that's amazing. And I think here's the deal. You guys, this is about capacity, right? It's about your capacity. That was a lot of work. What you just described is a lot of work. And if you have the capacity to do that and you have the connections, that's great. And I can be here as a support, just like I try to tailor the work that I do with a business. I want to tailor any kind of interactions I have with any of you the same way. So meet you where you are. If you want me to run things and like pull in, and like do the reach out and have the conversations and then pull you in, or if there's another role that I can play, it's really about your capacity to do that, because it's a ton of work. And when you're trying to run a program and you're trying to run a program that's understaffed and all of the other issues that you're dealing with, it's not realistic for everybody. And I get that. And so I think that it's really about trying to kind of nudge businesses and do it in a way that kind of then can meet you where you are. But
I think your role that you're talking about, for you to be that bridge and have that voice, is very important, because you're right. We might not have a strong voice at a table, or we might not be in a capacity to share what value that could bring. So I think that's very instrumental for you to connect with the business community, because I think on behalf for childcare programs, that's a huge asset to have, because you're opening that door, and then other people, we can kind of use that language and that framework to build on. So I definitely think that's a great avenue that you're doing, and it could be just tremendously supportive to all that we're doing. So thank you for that.
I think something else I want to be really clear about. So if you go to the Creative Childcare Solutions webpage, you'll see there's a fee structure. So there is, and it's not a lot of dollars. When you think about what most companies pay for consultants, we've priced this in a way more just to have companies, it's more of a psychological thing, like to have them really think that this is an important service. It's also because this is in a way a pilot, like we're trying to really demonstrate that there's a need for this. And I'm hopeful that as we move past the kind of the length of the ARPA dollars, that this becomes an initiative that DHS and this administration wants to fund ongoing. So we're starting there, but those fees would never be charged to programs. Those fees are for the business side. So if you come to me and say, I have business X, and I think if we approach them, that there's no, I'm there, I'm doing that with you. And if it turns out that business enters into a contract with me, that's great. I actually think it probably wouldn't happen, because you're the expert and you can do everything that I'm doing for them. But if you don't have the capacity to do that, then I'm there to do those things. So I know that I had heard that there was some concerns in the community about the fact that this was a fee for service.
I have a copy that I just need.
Somebody has.
Like I had them do that.
Somebody is not on mute and is having a conversation. If you could, thank you. So just to be clear that we would never charge providers for any of these interactions.
So there's a few more questions.
There's only 8 minutes left. Holy
I know
cow.
there's only 8 minutes. I know.
Holy cow.
Yeah. So one of the questions was, what are your plans for lower income areas, many of which do not have large employers to even consider it? And I think that kind of, I think in some ways you've answered that question, but at the same time, when we talk about the income disparities, and there's a subsequent question that also talks about providers who work with in agricultural areas and with migrant workers who need childcare. So I mean, they have some very specific. Yeah.
And I have to be honest, I haven't we've not even encountered the agricultural question at this point. That's a really good question. I have to think about that, and probably want to reach out to some people to get some ideas from you all. If that's the situation that you're in, that would be, knowing any information you can give me to support that, because that was not on my radar. I'm going to be honest. The lower income one, I mean, again, I think it's about really thinking, it's about the multiple solutions. It is not always going to be that we're opening a new site or asking somebody to expand. It's really about finding out, where are your employees currently getting care, or where would they get care if there were slots available, and how do you invest in that program? But it's also another strategy of saying to the employee, we're going to give you resources for you to use in the care setting that makes sense for you and your family. So it's trying to create that balance that is much of a comprehensive kind of approach as we can get to. I wouldn't go into this saying there's just one strategy for an employer. There has to be multiple strategies, because everybody's needs are going to be different. And when we do, that's another reason for doing that needs survey, is that they can see, they might have an idea about what one section of their employees is saying their problem is, but maybe there's a section that doesn't have quite the same voice, and they have a whole other set of issues that are going on that doesn't match what this issue is. And so you can't just go to the squeaky wheel. You have to understand, if you really want to do this, you need to look at the full set of issues that employees are having, and they're all going to be different. It's going to,
And I think the point has come up that many large childcare franchises have been doing this, and they have been doing this. I mean, they've been doing this, since I date myself, since the 80s. I mean, where they were marketing nationally to large businesses, to go in and say, we can provide you a solution for your.
Right. And they've got the capacity to do that. They have HR staff, they have, business development staff, but when we're talking about you all, the average Pennsylvania childcare provider, again, who is being a center director, being an owner, trying to run a business, and probably trying to run a business that's understaffed. There are just real capacity issues that we're recognizing that you have. And again, you're the experts, you know how to do this stuff. All of you, I'm sure, on this call have participated in the Start Strong and the Pre-K for PA campaign. It's the same skills. It's just tweaking them slightly. Your target is a little different. Your target, instead of it being a legislature, it's being a business. The ask is a bit different. Instead of it being a large kind of support this in a budget ask, it's a very specific, this is what, if you did this for my program, if you purchased these slots, if you number of different strategies, this is what we could do together. It's refining the message to really, for the audience that you're going with, but you've all done it, and I know could do it again. It's just, how much support do you want in doing it, given the stressors that you're under?
Just as an aside, it was a couple of weeks ago that I was approached by, or I got a phone call, and it was one of those things, Karen, because you know how my phone is like I go, is that somebody that I know? Because it doesn't always come up with a photo ID. And I was like, who is this is calling me from Lebanon? Okay. But it turned out it was a colleague who is the executive director of the Lebanon Chamber of Commerce. And her members are very interested in trying to find a solution for the childcare issues. And how could they engage, in the campaigns, in the Start Strong campaign. So it's leading to some additional conversations on the advocacy side. And I know that the advocacy campaigns see the chambers as a wonderful conduit to reach out to families, but also to businesses.
Yeah. And I think ELIC, again, ELIC was started to really kind of get that public will, and we've done that. There's just no doubt that this is a bipartisan issue that people get. So the idea of being able to give businesses firsthand experience in the financing and why it costs what it costs, why the market is broken, so that they can be better advocates. I think it's another strategy to build that, definitely.
And I think Susan's saying here, that most of the businesses in her area, also her families work for small businesses. So I think that idea of fleshing out the model of, kind of a shared service model for a group of, and that could be through the local chamber, or it could be through the township business. Almost all towns have a business district association. Fleshing that out and using that to leverage.
Well, and again, there are other things, strategies that even a small business can use. So something like EITC, they're going to get a huge portion of those scholarship dollars back. The uptake in pre-K EITC in this state, it's sad. It's a spreadsheet. It's a spreadsheet that fits on my one monitor. I don't even have to scroll or use multiple monitors to see who it is. That's how little uptake there is on it. And it doesn't solve everything, but again, we know what contracted slots in the pre-K world did in terms of giving programs a bit more flexibility with infants and toddlers that are just strictly based on rates or, reimbursement rates and private pay. It's the same kind of thing. It's not going to solve the problem, but it's going to give a little bit of wiggle room. And so even those small tweaks for smaller businesses, there's something that can be done to make them more family friendly and make them and have them develop a better connection between them and your program, so that you're better able to meet their needs, and they maybe are doing stuff that can, have ripple effects that support you.
So there's a couple of people who are in the chat that says, yeah, let's talk.
Okay.
I can get a group of businesses
if you
together.
go to the very last slide, Diane, it's got all my contact information on it. I skipped a bunch of slides. Yeah.
Tell me where, because
there we go.
I have multiple windows open, so I can see everything.
So please reach out, send me an email, give me a call on that cell phone number. And again, if there's any connections, I think anytime we can bring multiple businesses together and bring a provider in to have that conversation and talk about possibilities, it makes it much more concrete and much more doable for them. And again, we don't have to, this isn't about like opening up childcare centers everywhere. Even these tiny steps will have an impact, and you build on that. So that worked really well. Hey, what do you think about doing this now? It's about that kind of really fostering and cultivating those relationships with your business, the businesses that are employing. And it's not just, don't just think about the families that you're serving, think about the families that you could be serving.
Right.
So, yeah.
So this is good. So just to let you know that I will have the chat. So people who entered information in the chat, I will be sharing that with Karen. So she'll have your contact information for those who said, reach out. But also, just in case, please do reach out to Karen at her email address there. I think that this is exciting, okay? And I really do think having Karen in this role and her experience and knowing both the challenges and the opportunities that the field is facing now and in the future puts the field in a really good place. And I think we can come up with good solutions that work both for our large and small businesses, but also for providers. And there's lots of options out there. So,
and I do want to encourage you, if there are still concerns, if you think that we're missing something, either we're making an assumption that just isn't really right, or we've just completely like the idea of, it never even occurred to me. I hadn't even thought about the agricultural part of it.
Right.
Any concerns that you still have about this, please send them to me, because we really want to make sure that we're thinking about this in a comprehensive way. And we might not be able to address everything, but again, you guys know from my role as external relations person, you need to understand what the problem, you might not be able to fix the problem, but you need to understand what it is so that you can do what you can. So I want to be aware of what any of those issues are. So, and you guys are the ones that are going to help me figure that out because you're doing the work.
So this is good. So I'm seeing lots of stuff here. So please do continue. We're at time. I do want to remind people of a couple of things. One is that next week, Governor Shapiro announces his budget, and he did give us a preview that there's supposed to be things good in there for childcare. So we're all going to be looking anxiously for what he presents to the General Assembly on Tuesday. So if you're near the television, you can turn it on. Please tune in to see what he has to say. But also there will be lots of information coming out about that. The Education and Policy Committee will be meeting, the PACA Education and Policy Committee will be having a short meeting that Friday to talk about what was in that budget. So I'm just giving a public policy plug, Karen.
No, that's good. That's good.
So again, if you have any questions, please do, or suggestions or thoughts, please let Karen know. And again, if you have other questions that you want to direct to me, please do so. It's easy, diane.barber@paca.org. So this is good. I want to thank everybody for joining us this morning. And have a good week. And
Yeah, thank
happy
you.
March 1st. Can you believe it? It's like March 1st.
Mhm.
And hopefully you didn't get too much snow over these past few days and just have to dry out. So, okay, good.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about it and to hear your ideas, and that I'm excited about this, if you can't tell.
This is good. Okay, I am going to log off now. So, bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.